So, I am nowhere near cool enough to get invited to E3, unfortunately. However, thanks to the magic of live streaming and the internet, I'm still able to watch the press conferences, and from there, make recap videos about them. So, I just got finished watching EA's press conference, and first things first. EA would like you to know that it is now called EA Play. I don't know. It seemed like regular press conference to me, but according to them, it's something different. And along with it being something different, they also tried something unique, I guess, which was having simultaneous shows in both LA and in London. And they cut back and forth between the two of them, so one would do a spot and the other would do a spot, and it would just switch between them in real time. I'm not sure if that means that I missed half of the show, since the one that I watched appeared to be based in LA. I'm not sure what was going on in the other stage when I was watching one or the other of them, but doesn't matter. I watched the official live stream, so I should hopefully have seen all of the same announcements that you did. Okay, well, that's entirely enough in the world of EA press conference branding. On to the news. The first thing they showed off was Titanfall 2, which they made sure to mention was going to be on PlayStation 4 for the first time. And to drive that point home, they had the gameplay trailer, which, if you look at the button prompts on the bottom of the screen, you'll see they're all PlayStation button prompts. So they would like you to know that not only is it coming to PlayStation 4, it's kind of, in a way, already there. The trailer was actually surprisingly cool. I personally didn't like the first Titanfall that much, but the second one, it looks to be bigger and grander and more scripted, which makes sense given that this time around, instead of just focusing on multiplayer, they're also doing a single-player storyline, which according to them is going to focus on the relationship between the pilot and Titan. Based on the trailer, however, it looks like it's going to be a lot of the Titan itself, since it's got its own personality and motivations, and the entire trailer is voiced by the Titan, who, by the way, sounds an awful lot like Optimus Prime. Which, yeah, robots saving the world, Transformers, Optimus, it's basically the same thing. They made sure to mention that the single player was offline, so yeah, there's that. If you are the kind of person who cared primarily about the multiplayer in Titanfall, however, they'd like you to know that there are 6 new Titans, each that have new abilities. They didn't show off or focus on any of them, but 6. There's also more customization options, which again, they didn't show off, so you're just going to have to take their word for that. There's a sign-up for the beta online as well. Next was Madden, which, you know, it's football and the rules haven't actually changed that much, so if you didn't care about any of the previous year's Maddens, you're probably not going to care about this one. The new commentary team, which is one of the few definitive features they were able to point to as being new for this year, probably isn't going to make the difference if you're not already on the Madden fan train. And that's a similar problem that pretty much all of the other updates have. There's going to be weekly challenges now, which EA has divided up into 3 levels, which are Challenger, Premier, and EA Majors, which go from a personal level, working with partners level, and the actual pro level at the top, respectively. They also used the show to announce the Madden 16 championship, and so they had 2 of the lead players give a little pre-recorded spiel about how they were the best and they're going to beat the other guy, which, good for you. I'm sure one of you is going to win. They had the 8 final players from the competitive bracket up on stage. They didn't do much, but they got to go to E3, which is more than can be said about me. There was a large focus on the competitive side of Madden this year. They announced that there's going to be an entire year worth of events pre-scheduled for Madden 17, which is going to include events in all 3 of those tiers that I just mentioned. There's also $1 million worth of prizes, so if you are particularly good at Madden, there's hope for you, and if you're not very good at Madden, time to practice. Mass Effect Andromeda was shown off. They didn't show off much. Even when they announced it, they said, we're real excited about this. We'll show you more in the fall. So pretty much all that we got was a trailer. And the good news, though, is that the trailer is actually pretty exciting. It's a much darker tone, I think, than the previous Mass Effects. It looks like it's going to focus more on exploration. The trailer was a mix of art and CG bits, and there were only 2 little bits in there that looked like they might have been gameplay. Those very well could have been pre-rendered as well, but assuming they were gameplay, they look very much similar to the sort of over-the-shoulder shooting that the previous games had, just, with a lot more dust and reflections and general next-generation graphical shenanigans. EA would like you to know that they support all of their games a lot. They made a point to mention that there's over 300 updates across all of their games. Depending on how you look at it, that either means that their games are buggy and need to be patched a lot, or it means that they're constantly improving. Depends on how much you like EA and their games, but either way, 300 updates is, I guess, a lot, even if you divide it across all of the total number of games that they've released, which might bring down the average number of updates per game. They just want you to focus on the big number. 300. There's free trials for the Outer Rim expansion for Star Wars Battlefront, and EA Access is also free for a week, so get on that. Play to Give is a charity. They didn't do a great job of explaining how it was going to work, but it looks like there's in-game challenges, and then people do them, and EA gives money to charity at the end. Maybe they're going to give the money anyway. Maybe it depends on you being good at the game, or otherwise, like, starving people in other countries don't get food. I don't know the relationship between charity and game here, but they would like you to know. In-game challenges, charity, EA is benevolent and will just throw money to good causes, assuming you buy their games. Next was FIFA, which I have to admit I honestly don't really care about soccer, or as they incessantly called it throughout the presentation, football, just to get you confused with that and Madden. But even though I don't really care about FIFA too much, they introduced it in a cool way by showing the evolution of the game from its debut in 1993 to now. So they showed a little snippet from one game, and then it faded into a snippet from the next game, and so on all the way up. And you can see you might not be surprised by this, but graphics have gotten a lot better since 1993. The big new feature of FIFA 17 is a new story mode, which is going to focus on a single player and his rise up through the ranks. His name is Alex Hunter. I can tell he yells a lot and has sports drama, which there's not really too much else you can do with a 100% sports-focused storyline. So, if nothing else, it's going to provide meaningful framing for games that otherwise would just be sort of random. I'm not sure how far they're going to go with it as far as unique set-piece moments or things outside of the games on the field, but that's what they wanted to focus on. The single-player, dedicated story aspect of football, soccer. Which is an odd direction to take, because you'd think that you'd be focusing on the gameplay more than anything else, but at this point, just like with football, they haven't really changed the rules too much, so they have to add something new, and single-player story mode is as good as any. That single-player story mode is called The Journey, and we got to see a trailer of it, which really just showed off a series of cutscenes. Didn't give us an idea about how it would be structured, but it served its job. It teased it. Oh, and if you care about not just the players, but also the managers, excellent news! The managers are now going to be rendered, assuming that you are a fan of one of the 3 teams whose managers they've chosen to render. This is great news for you. If you like any of the other teams, sorry. Maybe next year. Maybe next year they will have like 100% motion capture for all of the managers, but this year you're just going to have to live with 3. There's a bit of a new program that they announced as well called EA Originals. It's basically an indie incubator that has a nice name. It's not really any different than what the major publishers are doing, which makes sense given that EA is another major publisher. The big distinction, though, that EA Originals has is that 100% of the profit is going to be going back to the developers that they're partnering with. I'm not sure how EA makes money off of this, but that's not really my problem. It's possible that they're looking at this as just promotional material for them, just to generate goodwill, so that way people will think, oh yeah, EA, they selflessly funded this, small European developer's game. They must be great guys. Speaking of small European developer, we got to see the first EA Originals game, which is called Fee. I'm not even sure how to describe it. You're like an animal in a forest that is purple and misty, and there's other animals, and you make sounds at them. It seems artsy, has something to do with our connection to nature. When it comes out, you will get a chance to play it and see how it works out. But just from watching it, and there's a little bit of gameplay in the trailer, it's hard to tell what it's going to turn into. You look kind of like a lemur, if that helps. And there's like robot-looking guys in the forest, if that helps too, which it probably doesn't. EA dedicated a surprising amount of the show to something that they didn't actually have that much to say about, which was Star Wars. They brought up, the Star Wars music and the Star Wars logo, and it shows like the names of 7 studios along the bottom, and so you think, they're going to be announcing lots of stuff. And we didn't get lots of stuff. What we got was a brief mention of new Battlefront. That pretty much all that they said about it. New Battlefront later. Respawn is working on a third-person action game. Yeah, it's a lot to get excited about, I know. And Visceral is also working on something. There was a trailer. There was a trailer. But the trailer was more of a flyabout through the studio. You watch people drawing on their tablets. You see people doing motion capture. Lots of shots of different cities and people talking about like how much Star Wars means to them and how it's great to be making games. But you don't actually see much of the games. There's like 5 seconds of gameplay from, like maybe not even gameplay, but there's 5 seconds of footage from one of those 3 new games. It's probably not Battlefront, but they didn't say which one it is, so wild speculation on my part. I'm going to go with the Visceral Games one. That's probably what it is. And the only other real gameplay there was people playing on tablets, phones. Yeah, they made a big deal out of Star Wars, but they didn't actually bring much to show off other than, boy, we sure are excited about Star Wars and we've got stuff to show you later. One interesting thing, though, in the trailers was it showed somebody wearing one of the PlayStation VR headsets and looking around. There's X-Wing looking thing shown on the screen. Maybe not an X-Wing. Definitely a cockpit, though, meaning that there's something virtual reality and Star Wars planned. I don't know if that's a part of one of those 3 games they were talking about, or if that's just something they were playing around with. But either way, it shows virtual reality and Star Wars will be meeting some way at some point. They closed out the show with what was probably the single most anticipated thing, which is, of course, Battlefield 1. Which it was introduced, actually, by talking about what a difficult pitch it was. Apparently there were people on the team that for years thought it was a great idea, and only now has EA gotten around to making it. They made a big deal out of talking about how no battle would ever be the same, and a lot of that has to do with the destruction, which of course we've seen in previous games. But there's also dynamic weather, meaning that one time you'll play through it, and it's nice. As nice of weather as you can get World War I Battlefield, but still, nice weather. Other times it might be foggy, there might be rain. I'm not sure how many settings there are or how that's going to be implemented, but either way, it could be interesting starting up a game and, all of a sudden it's raining at night and so all of your plans are ruined, which would actually be a pretty realistic war simulator. Yeah, you've got your gun, you're all excited, and then everything goes wrong and you die. Which, not at all uplifting. They had a trailer. And the trailer actually looks really good. The beginning of it was obviously CGI, but then they showed little bits of what were either gameplay or simulated gameplay. But either way, the entire thing looks remarkably pretty for Warzone. Honestly, it looks a lot more like World War II than World War I. I mean, assuming you don't pay much attention to the airships or any of those sorts of things. But then again, given the presence of the airships and that it's alternate history, I guess they can make it look like whatever they want, can't they? There's going to be an open beta for Battlefield 1 this summer. That's the information they gave me. That's the information I'm giving you this summer. Keep an eye out for it. Between them talking about it and the trailer, we got to see and hear about several new vehicles. There were horses, which we got to see in the trailer, but they also said something about battleships and, most interestingly, I think, trains. And if trains are a controllable vehicle, I actually don't know how that would be implemented, but that would be certainly new and unique for the series. If nothing else, you get to go around choo-choo. Also, after the show, there's going to be a 64-player demo of the multiplayer. And by 64-player, I mean team of 32 versus team of 32. Which would be great and would be exciting for me to show you, would be exciting to watch. None of that's going to happen because when they said after the show, they meant not in the live stream. Or at least not in the live stream that is their press conference. So you're just going to have to take my word for it, and I'm just going to have to take their word for it, and 64 players is happening. Looking at it by the numbers, EA's show was, I'm not going to say a disappointment, but there certainly wasn't much that we hadn't at least heard of before. Yes, there were several trailers that we hadn't seen before, but there wasn't that much in the way of new information. Certainly not much that was surprising. Really, just looking at the numbers tells the story. There were like 6 games that were actually shown off. If you include the little Star Wars snippets, you could maybe, super charitably, get that up to 9. But there were really only 6 games that were meaningfully shown off. And out of all of those, only Fee was, new. And going 1 out of 6 on new things, maybe that's not E3 material. I don't know. Just E3 seems like maybe you should have bigger announcements, but you work with what you have, and they showed off what they have, and to be completely fair, a lot of what they have looks good, and Titanfall in particular I'm more interested in now than I was before, and Battlefield 1 looks better than I expected, so I'm not saying it was a bad show, but it certainly wasn't a surprising show that you would tell your friends about afterwards. Speaking of telling your friends about afterwards, however, we will be producing similar recap videos for all of the conferences. And so if you want to watch them, you can subscribe, or you can just manually find your way back to our channel, whichever is easier for you. You can also tell all of your friends to watch as well, which I would appreciate. I don't know if they would appreciate it, but you have to tell them in order to find out if they'd appreciate it, right? And it's a risk that I think is worth you taking. Well, thank you very much for watching. I hope that you will join me later today for Bethesda's conference and in a few days from now for everyone else's.